My guest today is one of my favorite people in comedy. She was one of Comedy Central's Up Next comics in 2018 and featured in season 9 of Last Comic Standing, the host of the Who's Your God podcast. I'm excited to welcome Amy Miller.
Hey, Adam.
Thanks
What's
for coming
up?
on.
Thanks for having me.
I tried to be
Thanks
as
for reading
professional
my
as I
bio.
could. Yeah. I went deep on your bio.
You read the first 2 lines.
It was
That's
your
good.
Wikipedia page, you know.
That's all we need.
It was concise.
I don't have a Wikipedia yet. No one's made
don't?
me one. I'm gonna have to make it myself, I guess.
Nerd. I
know.
I mean, your website's pretty good though. Did you do all that on your own?
I did. Yeah, I just used Wix, and then I got a template that I think was like a drag queen's website because they just, you can use like whatever template. I thought it was cute, and yeah, it's been pretty easy to update and stuff. And I could sell my own tickets on it. When I figured that out, I was really pumped.
Oh yeah. What's that website for anyone interested?
Oh, amymillercomedy.com. Yeah, I have some dates coming up, but nothing I'm selling tickets for. But I was like, oh, I can do like these tour dates and just like control all the ticketing on my own. Like, that's awesome.
That's
Wix
rad.
is cool, man. Yeah.
That's
it's not
really
like
cool.
the cheapest hosting option, probably. I mean, I think I pay like maybe $250 a year or something.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's been worth it.
There you go. I mean, as long as my listeners go to Amy Miller. What was it again?
amymillercomedy.com.
Okay, they'll check it out. They can give you some feedback. But where are you right now? You're staying with your mom?
Oh no, I'm back in my apartment. This is my home.
Back in LA?
Mm-hmm.
So the tour's done, right?
Well, yeah, I did a tour with Johnny Pemberton. It was only a couple weeks long, although it felt like kind of an eternity. Not because of Johnny, like just because doing a different city every night is really exhausting. We had a ton of fun and we get along really well. And we saw you in Seattle, of course.
Yeah, thank you for that, by the way. That was fucking awesome. And
it was fun, right?
Good.
Like both shows were almost sold out.
One of them, but
I missed the set where You Think You Bombed, and I'm pretty upset about that. I would like to see that.
Yeah, it just was a weird transition, but we got through it.
But then, yeah, we ended that, and then I went back out to do some other dates. I was in Vegas for like 2 solid weeks, which is terrifying. And then I have more stuff coming up in the next couple months, but and like looking at fall and winter with so many uncertainties. But I'm like, I need to maybe fill my calendar so I have income, because comedy is my only job right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like, everyone's once again like, oh, we're not sure if we'll still be open like in October or whatever. So crazy. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. But
where was your favorite place on the tour though that you guys did?
I mean, we had a lot of fun in Portland. It's always a good time in Portland. They're so supportive. Like, we sold out 2 shows there, but we did 2 separate nights, because in Seattle we did 2 shows in one night, which was also really fun, but it's just like a different vibe. And yeah, at the Siren Theater in Portland, which is always like a fun place to perform, and they're always so great to me. And it was a lot of people's first like event back. Like when we were selling merch and stuff, like people would come up and be like, oh, I haven't been, like, you're the first thing I've gone back out to, in a year and a half or whatever. So that was really fun. Yeah. We kind of had fun on every date except for Vegas, I would say, which was low key awful.
Why was that?
Well, let's see. The venue was very cute. We basically, this guy who runs a weekly show in Vegas, who's very nice, like kind of let us take over his weekly show and like sell tickets for it and stuff. And he was like, oh, I've never done this, but like, I'm willing to try it. There's just not a lot of independent comedy shows in Vegas. It's a real club town, it's fucking Vegas, the vibes. And so people who are the local comics that are trying to get like locals to come to shit and do like weekly indie shows. They have a huge uphill battle because it's hard to get locals to pay for anything because they live in this like entertainment capital. But I think where he kind of fucked up was he was like, he did ask me if comics could come for free. And I said yes, which I kind of always try to do. Like, if, you know, if any comics are listening and you ever want to come to one of my shows, like just DM me and like I'll put you on the list. And I don't want comics paying. But it was like an open mic across the street, like dumped out into the back of our show. Shit. So they were just all like talking and drinking. And I was like, yeah, I would rather not have that. I would rather have like the group of 25 people who bought a ticket to see me and Johnny specifically than just have bodies in the room, like making fucking noise. So it was kind of obnoxious for that reason. But I don't know. It was one night and then we just got the fuck out of there.
Well, that's the weird thing too about like, you would think having the room be full would always be better, but like when you're getting people like randoms filling seats like that makes it, I would say, a worse show than like having so much it be worse. A quarter, because it's just like 6 conversations are happening while you're on stage and everybody's hammered.
And it wasn't, and they weren't sitting and watching the show. They were just like, oh, we'll go hang out at this thing. But we were performing. And I just never understand that because as a new comic, I went to so many shows, but I was very attentive because I wanted to like learn and watch people and know like what other people were making jokes about so that I didn't also do this like well-trodden territory of, you know, or that I didn't do like hack shit. I've never understood like going to a show to ruin it, basically. Like if I wanted to talk to someone, I would just go outside, you know what I mean? Like, but these were like open mic comics. And to be frank, aside from a handful of headliners that come into the Vegas clubs, like locally, they don't have a lot of great comics. Like, let's just say that Vegas is this weird dumping ground for people who like had a scandal in their last town and got run out of their state. And then they had to like hide away in Vegas where nobody
like
cares.
Alaska of comedy.
Yeah. Like everyone's on the lam there, it feels like, or they're like these bitter fucking, 55-year-old dudes who've been doing this for so long and feel like they should be further along, but they're like, not that good and they don't venture out that much. It's just such a weird place comedically.
And the crowds have got to be weird too, because it's like tourists and fucking the local people can be pretty weird and everybody's looking for a deal and like it's I lived in Vegas for a while. It's a weird place. I mean, I can't believe you spent 2 weeks there. That must have felt like it never was going to end.
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, it was nice to like just have the 2 weeks at 2 different clubs back to back. Like it was convenient, but then a weekend I was like, what have I done? It was fun. I mean, it was just so many reps, but I did wish that they had like one night off because Vegas never stops. Like they do shows on Sunday and Monday, 2 shows every single night. So there wasn't even one night where I only had one show. Like every day.
So how many?
I woke up. It was like,
did you do total in Vegas?
I ended up doing 28, I think, in 2 weeks. Yeah.
How
and they were all
yourself. Were you at the end? Like,
very sick. And they're all 15 or 20-minute sets. And yeah, the thing about the Vegas crowds is like, it is such a mix of people, but there's just like a pacing in that town where there's a reason people stay there and become sort of hacky because there's just a short attention span. You know what I mean? It's like the shows are short. They lean close to an hour because the casinos want everyone back out gambling. They don't want them, sitting in an air conditioned room for 2 hours having a nice time. And so it's just all your jokes get kind of boiled down to like their most basic punchy parts. And if you do it enough times, like you start to worry that you lost the full version of the joke that you can do for like a regular comedy club or a more attentive crowd. So it's really good practice, but in some ways it like sets you back. I think if you do too many in a row, like I did, but like, yeah, the crowds politically obviously are very mixed. Right now, they're more conservative than usual because more, I guess, conservative people are traveling in the middle of a pandemic, but it's not, I mean, I'm also traveling. I'm not like casting aspersions or whatever. But that's just sort of what's happening. It's like most people going to Vegas right now with their family or whatever for vacation are, a lot of them are like anti-maskers or whatever.
It was so weird. I went there over New Year's and like there were people on the floor like with masks and stuff. And I was driving through to go to Phoenix and like I'm walking just to go get coffee or whatever. And like people are like that you had to wear a mask, but if you were smoking, you'd like have to lift
Yeah.
the mask up. And then people were trying to play craps and like someone would win and they'd want to like high five everybody, but they weren't allowed to touch. So it was this weird, like we want to do this, but it's just a weird place to be with
Yeah.
those types of restrictions. And like, I mean, Vegas is weird enough as it is, but
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah, and it's like a whole economy based on like events, gathering and gambling and drinking. And then
yeah,
it's like they were pretty strict, I will say, both clubs about making people put their masks back on. But yeah, everyone was like, take a sip and put it back on or whatever. I saw a few people really like try to fight security and the bouncers about wearing it, even though they knew going into it that they were supposed to. I don't know, but
it's
but
interesting times.
yeah, I don't like change my material. And so I still keep all the parts that I know a certain segment of the crowd is just gonna hate. Because I'm not gonna fucking, I don't know, back down to these
Yeah.
people. But it is, yeah, eventually you're just sort of on autopilot, I guess, or doing like a lot more crowd work than maybe you should be. But yeah, 28 sets of mostly 15 or 20 minute, all 15 or 20-minute sets. So it was a lot of stage time and it was a blast, but also like, I don't need to go back for a while, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like at least when you were in town with Johnny and stuff, like you guys were having fun. Like after the show, there was a pretty funny moment where he had he got kind of trapped in a corner with somebody that was like I walked past and I just heard the girl talking to him. She's like, "Do you want to come back to my van? Me and my boyfriend live in this van."
Yeah.
And you looked at me and you're like, whenever Johnny or I get trapped by like an audience member, we give each other a certain look. And he just at some point he just turned and just started smiling at you. It was the funniest shit. But
Oh yeah. And sometimes we could not look at each other because we would start
cracking up.
laughing so hard. And then, yeah, we don't want, someone to think we're making fun of them or whatever. But this lady was pretty nutty. She was a mail lady, a mail carrier. She worked for the
Yeah.
postal service. So she like lived in her van, but, also spends all day in a truck listening to podcasts. So she was a big fan of Johnny. And I had a conversation with her that was so bizarre. I wasn't exactly sure what was going on. So I'm just like an asshole. So I was like, you should go talk to Johnny. Like, just go say hi. He's very approachable.
Somebody did that.
So I like
Barunji
sent
did
her
that
over there.
too. It's just occasionally there was one guy who was like a cancer survivor that showed up at I think it was one of these shows. And Barunji's like, "Hey, you should talk to Adam. He knows everything about this." And I'm like 10 seconds to the conversation. And I realized, like, oh, he just dropped a bomb. Like it's such a shitty feeling because you're like, I'm gonna be here as long as I until I can come up with a reasonable excuse to get away from this person.
Yeah. When we were in Santa Cruz, I was like, Johnny, let's go to this like shitty dive bar across from our hotel. And he was very reluctant. And then as soon as we went in, he's like, oh, this place is amazing. There's like 4 people here. There's like a Hell's Angel playing pool. They're playing like old Waylon Jennings records or whatever. Bartender was a real nut. And we had been very like pretty, COVID safe, I guess. Up to that point. And then this bartender, I don't know, she just broke us down and she like took out a cheese plate and she was like feeding us cheese from her hands. And we were eating it and we were just like, I don't know. I guess if we get COVID, this is when it's going to happen.
Some
But
lady
that was one of
cheese
those
at a dive
times.
bar.
Yeah, we were like, we could not look at each other. Like we were just eating the cheese and staring at the bar because we knew if we looked at each other, we would both break down because it was the funniest fucking situation. She was like wearing cat ears, you know, she was uh, like you could tell she was very, very hot at some point, and she has been working at that bar for probably 25 years, but still dresses the same as if she's, 30. Yeah, we have a lot of fun together in that way. Just like he does, like I do, we just enjoy like the characters on the road, like just meeting people like that. I mean, that's one of my favorite things is just like, even when you get trapped in a conversation, like with that postal lady, you're still going to remember it. That's like a highlight of the tour almost.
So crazy. How do you know Johnny, by the way? Because you guys, I mean, you pair really well together on stage and stuff. Like you complement each other well. And he's just, when I was talking to him, he was a super nice guy. Like I don't know if it's a Minnesota thing or what.
Oh yeah, Minnesota. Yeah. He is a very nice guy. Yeah, and I think we're so different on stage that it's like very complimentary. We travel well together. I mean, we just know each other from comedy, I guess. Like I'm trying to think the first time I met him. It's hard to say because we have a lot of like several close friends in common, like Blair Saki and Steve Hernandez and stuff. Yeah, I just met him in LA, like through comedy. We've done a few festivals together where we've hung out like at South by and stuff. But he wanted to get back out again. He had like a big, like network show announced and then it didn't get picked up. So I think at that point he was like bummed out, rightfully so, and then wanted to just like go perform because that's something that like, in LA, there's always like this constant disappointment where you like almost get a role and then don't, or like almost get a special and then don't. And like what you can control is like going out and doing shows for the most part. You can plan it, anybody can put together a little run for themselves. And it kind of feels like, oh, I'm taking back, like this is something that I can completely just decide and have fun and like make a little money without, being judged by someone else or whatever. Yeah. It's an opportunity that's always there. So yeah, so he wanted to get back on the road and asked me if I would go on a little tour with him. And I said, yes, of course.
That's fun though. Like, and it sucks he didn't get it, but I mean, at least you guys had a good, do you think like you're going to continue going with him on the next leg of this, or are you just going to do your own thing?
I don't know. We talked about maybe doing another another run in the spring or something. I mean, I've for the most part I've traveled by myself, and then I've done a couple tours with like one or two friends, and it's really tricky, the chemistry of it, like who you're going to work well with, because not just on stage but like someone who pulls their own weight promoting and helping organize and drives, and
you did a shitload of, like, I don't think people understand how much work you do on your end for that stuff you booked all the openers, like all the travel, like it
was a ton of work. And in the past I've been in that situation where like I take on the work myself. I'm not like a victim. I worked in marketing and for venues and promoters for years and in ticketing. So I'm used to doing that stuff and it's fine. But with Johnny, there was like no tension around. I was just like, I'm willing to do more of this portion of the work. And then you pick up the slack in these other areas, but also I'm taking a 10% booking fee for like putting this tour together. And he was like, of course, with other people that might be a whole conversation where, it would be uncomfortable, but Johnny's very equitable in, everything he does and easy to deal with. So like, he definitely like did his part. And even just the travel stuff, there's never like an argument about like the bill or, who's going to drive. It was just easy.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to find, especially with someone who compliments you comedically. You have like maybe an overlap of fans. Like Johnny and I definitely have like people that come out that already knew of both of us and are fans of both of us. But then we have our separate people, so that's good. And someone who's gonna like just help out. Like a lot of comics just don't. They just want to like have you do all the work and then show up and do the show. And it's like, no, this is a team effort.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things I was kind of curious about is like this booking piece and all like the admin and shit. Like, how do you, that's such a different side of the brain than like being silly Amy on stage. And like, how, like, do you just like pop an Adderall and you're like, I'm going to book flights for like the next like 10 hours or like what, how do you split it up? Cause it's gotta be kind of hard to switch sides of the brain like that.
Yeah. I guess I'm sort of used to it at this point, and because I did shit like that long before I even like started comedy. And I wouldn't say I like love it. I'm not. I think the drawback is like the night of the show, you know, Johnny is very helpful, and so he's always like, what can I take off your plate? But if you've dealt with the booker and the openers and the ticketing from the beginning, the night of the show, I'm basically, doing admin stuff, but also I have to try to be funny. So that is really where it gets the hardest, is like the actual night, because now I'm like the point person. That also means that, and we had this happen one time on this tour, that like, if someone is trying to short us money or like not pay us right away, like if someone's being shady, I have to deal with it now as like a comedian, like I might burn a bridge, and that always sucks. And Johnny was ready to be like, do you need a dude to go back there and talk to this guy? Because that's a legitimate thing. It's like a lot of the time it's more effective because a lot of these bookers are pieces of shit, and they'll just be like, oh, she was a diva, like she was difficult. And it's like, no, you're just not paying us what we agreed on. And here's the email, and I have a spreadsheet. Like, I'm very organized about the whole thing. So that part of it is tough, where you have to be both roles on the night of. But before that, it's all, I don't know, it's stuff I'm used to, because I've never, even now that I have reps, like they're not involved with my live dates at all. And that's like a choice that we kind of both made, because it's like, I don't want to give them 10 or 20% to like help me go out on the road. I can just do it myself and then keep all my money. So I've just always done everything myself since, for 10 years. So I just kind of got used to it.
Well, you also have like just a massive network of people, like when I put up pictures of doing the shows with you, I can't tell you how many different people are like, oh, I love Amy. I love Amy Miller. It's like everybody loves, or everybody knows Amy and hopefully loves you. But like,
that's nice.
How did that happen for you? Like being 10 years in, I can't imagine, like it almost feels like you've been doing it 20 or something with the reach that you've had.
Yeah, I don't know. That's funny, because it's something Johnny would bring up on the road too, because as that's sort of a third role that I'm always playing, like night of the show. It's like I'm dealing with the club and stuff, and I have to perform, but then in almost every city I have like old friends that are coming out, people that I used to work with, or like distant cousins or whatever. And Johnny's like, you don't have to talk to all these people. Do you know that? And I'm like, I don't know. I disagree. I'm not giving everyone a ton of time, but if it's like, like in Seattle, one of my best friends in the world lives there, and we've been friends since we were 17. So like, yeah, I got to spend some time with her. Like, you know what I mean? Because we don't have time on this tour to go get breakfast or whatever. So like, this is when I'm going to talk to her. And Johnny would always be like, you're giving away so much of your energy before you even get on stage. Like, you must be exhausted. And I am. That's true. Like, after every run, I need like a week to be by myself at home talking to no one, just to like recharge.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs. I've lived in a handful of cities, and I guess I don't know. I've just always met a lot of people. I probably am too generous a lot of the time with my social energy. That's changed like in the last 5 years or so, like who I give it to. I guess I have more boundaries now about that, or especially if I like don't vibe with someone. But I don't know. I just know a fuck ton of people, and I'm not exactly sure why.
Yeah.
I just have
it
lived in a lot of
surprised me.
different worlds.
Yeah. And I mean, you started in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And you were teaching during the day and then doing comedy at night, or was
At
that
that time, when I started, I was working for this company called Ticketfly, which is a big ticketing company that is now defunct, or they got bought out by Eventbrite and then Pandora, whatever. Can't remember the order of things, but now that brand is gone. But yeah, I was so I was working basically in a startup environment in San Francisco, and yeah, that's where I did my first set. But it was like first, when did I move to LA? I guess for like 6 or 7 years of stand up, I always had a full-time, pretty demanding job.
really?
And did comedy at night. So everything after that has felt like a fucking vacation. I mean, I've been poor, so that sucks, but like it's also really fun. You know, when I made the decision to just only do comedy, it was really scary, but it makes you hustle a lot more. And we've talked about this because you've, asked me about like if or when you should leave your job. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's different for everyone. For me, I knew that if I left my day job, I would work a lot harder at comedy, because once it's your income, it's like, oh shit, I gotta really get these dates on the books and audition for stuff and try to get my name out there. So,
But to do everything you're doing within like 10 years, I mean, that shows quite a bit. Like what was it like for you starting in San Francisco? Were you like doing shows really quickly, or was there like,
I kind of was. That's probably why I kept doing it. Like the momentum sort of took itself over, because I just like went to this open mic like a little bit as a joke, not like, oh, people who do open mics are losers, but like as a dare, I guess that's a better word.
well, you were 30 too. So it's like, that's a different look to be doing that than when you're like drunk at 19 or 20, like
yeah.
there's a lot of young people, especially in open mic.
Yeah, there were a ton of super young people, and I like forget sometimes like the people that I started with, like about our age difference. But some like my friend Claire O'Kane, who's very funny comedian. She lives in New York. She was like 19 when we started, so like a literal kid, and now we're
Crazy.
peers basically. But yeah, there's no other reason in my life I would have been hanging out with like 19 and 21-year-olds. But having said that, the year that I started in 2010 was like, deep in the middle of the recession. And a lot of people in the Bay Area, at least, were even 40 and up starting comedy for their first time, because they were just like, I lost my job. I'm fucking gonna lose my house. Like, I have to do something so I don't kill myself. Like, there were all these like older like dads and stuff who were starting comedy. So I was by no means anywhere close to the oldest. Although a lot of people I hung out with were much younger than me. But yeah, it was just kind of a dare. I didn't think I would go back, but then I think like I got some laughs and I met some really cool people, and the social part probably brought me back. And then after the second time, my second open mic set, someone offered me a show.
Shit.
Part of the reason too is in SF, like these like, I don't know, dudes who ran shows and especially like bringer shows would kind of sniff you out and be like, oh, she works in a startup. That means she has a whole office of people she can invite to her shows. So maybe she's not that funny yet, but we know she could probably get 20, 25 people out. And I did regularly. And then,
of course you did. I mean, it's just because you're excited and like, you don't know how valuable that is. Like,
yeah. But then it just became this thing where after, 3 or 4 years, I'm like, I don't want to be your bringer comic because I'm like getting kind of good and I just want to be invited on your show. You know what I mean? And then I started like a couple of my own shows in the Bay Area. And, it's like just the momentum. It's like once you have a couple friends in comedy and then you have a show name and you say that it's going to be weekly, like you can't just quit.
yeah.
Although about a year and a half in, I did take pretty significant amount of time off. So just because I was tired dealing with the scene and specifically the men in my scene. And I was like, I don't think I'm cut out for this, like spiritually. But thankfully I went back eventually. But I went back because someone like messaged me to book me for a show. And I was like, I guess, yeah, I'll do it. I mean, I haven't done comedy in like 10 months, but yeah, let's go.
So when you were like starting out though, were you out every night or what was because you had that day job and shit, were you pacing yourself or were you just kind of relentless?
No, I didn't pace myself at all. And I was really tired at work. um, I not every single night, but probably at least 4 or 5 nights a week, I would either do a mic, go watch a show, or go like hang out at the Punchline, or yeah, go to my own show. It was a lot. I mean, for sure. But I mean, that's what I wanted. I mean, that's why I eventually moved to Portland because even though I had a full-time day job there, I was like, there's so much stage time in Portland. Like, I just want to get away from my original scene. I'm not going to move to LA immediately, like so many people do, and then quickly realize it was a mistake.
Mhm.
Because you can't just show up 2 years in and nobody knows who the fuck you are and you're not that good yet and be like, where are my shows? There's just too many comics here. But yeah, kind of same thing in Portland. I was just working this day job and thankfully it was like in the entertainment business. Like I worked for venues and stuff. So a lot of people were coming to work at 11 a.m. I wasn't the only one. Like it was fine. But yeah, it was I mean, I'm still pretty relentless. I don't know. I thought it would slow down by this point, but I always tell myself when I'm home from the road, like I'll take a full week off. And then inevitably I'm like, oh, I have 7 shows this week. What have I done? So I just say yes. I say yes to everything. And then, and I'm fortunate enough to work the clubs here. And so like my week just fills up. I've like never slowed down for some reason.
Well, it's hard to say no too. Like that's what kind of bit me in the ass the weekend when you were in Seattle, where I got booked to do some shows. Like it was like 3 or 4 nights in a row of shows. And by the time you got there Sunday night, I was like, I don't know how many times you could have those like weird, I slept 4 hours, woke up, then in the middle of the day, just like fell asleep and came to and like it. And now I'm going to be on stage. Like, it's just, you're squeezing in sleep when you can. And
yeah,
it's and just the expectation of like always being on, it's fucking like what you said. But when you get home from that,
it's draining. Yeah.
It really is. But I think I've found like the hardest people to be around lately are like people that are trying to get established, at least around in this scene. Cause you go around them and it just feels like they're like, what can you do for me? What, like, help me. And you're like, dude, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to tell you, and I can't imagine what that's like for your level. Cause like, I'm sure as you get more experience and know more people and stuff, it's just the requests.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a big thing in the Bay Area and then Portland too, where it was like I got good enough and like started enough of my own shows that it would just and I had met a lot of comics across the country from doing festivals and stuff. So it just got to this point where people would be like, "Oh, you're gonna go to Portland and you won't need help getting shows, like call Amy Miller," and it's like, okay, that's
Everybody knows
nice.
Amy.
Yeah, like that's a compliment, but also like I do have to work on my own shit at some point. And that took years for me to develop more of those boundaries, and they're only like very recently getting better. But I would say I mean it's a freakish amount. Like probably literally 3 or 4 times a week someone asks me for help, and they're not always people I know. Like a lot of the time it's just like a literal stranger, being like, "Hey, where should I perform in LA?" And I'm like, and now I'll be like, here's a link to the Comedy Bureau, which lists all the shows. I do not currently have the bandwidth to help you book your stay. But I used to do that a lot more. And then it was actually my now ex who would be like, you have to stop helping so many people. Like it's nice, but also it's taking away from your own career and time and energy and like our relationship. And, I mean, it was crazy, but that happens a lot more to women in comedy for sure. That it's just like, oh, this is like a lady who like takes care of shit and like knows people. So she'll probably help me. And
Well, I mean, you've helped me with this a little bit with setting my own boundaries where like, I mean, we've talked about shit kind of on a related topic. And I mean, I'm sort of like the point of contact for a couple different venues at this point. Like if comics have questions about it, and like I've gotten to a point where I'm like, dude, I'm not employed by so and so, or like,
yeah, and you should be paid for that help.
It's like I can give you help as like comic to comic, like I can give you information that I know, but like I'm also not the only person that you can ask questions to. So it's like it's a double-edged sword of when you kind of get some recognition that everybody thinks you're the person to go talk to. And like I think that's a reflection on your shows too. Like you had successful shows and you were able, like there's not a lot of people that like they get a show and they stick with it, like you were able to do things. And then once you start doing that, the benefit to you is that people have a million questions for you.
Exactly. So and even managing the boundary of telling people no, because people are delusional. Like bad comics will ask to do a good show, and it's like they're not bad people, they're hustling like everybody else, but it's like being able to like turn someone down like is really tough. That's why it's always good to have a separate booker who's not a comedian, and it doesn't like, fuck with your sort of karma in the community or whatever. Cause some of these motherfuckers like don't forget, like they'll straight up be like, I can't stand Amy Miller because 7 years ago she wouldn't let me do her bar show in Portland, even though I was right. Like you were bad, but like
it's not personal either. Like,
well, yeah, people are just so sensitive, especially in the Northwest. You know this. Adam, I have to ask a favor. This is very unprofessional, but I mean, you can record it. I don't care. But when we started talking about comedy clubs, I realized I needed to call in my avails to the Comedy Store before 5.
Okay, go for it.
This is an interesting process for your listeners.
Let's just
enjoy. Hold on. Okay, what are my avails? Let's see. Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. Okay, that's good. Sorry. I was supposed to do it before I got on, and then I just forgot. Okay.
It's actually kind of cool. Okay. It'll be a fun inside thing.
I always forget what the cutoff time is. Okay.
Let's go speaker.
Hey, it's Amy Miller's calling in my avails. Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. Thank you so much. Bye. Okay. And then they go to their big giant
7 shows a week.
Big giant spreadsheet of 3,000 comics that are either past or in development. And then they put in my days, and most weeks there, I don't get anything every couple months at this point, but I work the Improv and the Laugh Factory a lot too. And I already sent those because those are emails, but on the Comedy Store, you have to call on Monday until it's like noon to 5 p.m. or something. I always like forget and then get in at the last second. Hopefully that doesn't hurt me. Or I call too early and they're like, it's not time yet. Please go back to bed. Yeah, but it's fun. It's a fun time.
Well, let's get back to like the Portland stuff a little bit. Like you were there, and when did you won Portland's funniest comedian? Was that the name of the title?
I won. The club has a contest every year during the summer. It's kind of ingenious. I'm honestly surprised that Laughs doesn't do it because it fills the seats in the summer, which is a really hard time, especially in the Northwest for comedy clubs. So from like basically all of June and July, I'm pretty sure they run this contest, and it has 1 million rounds. And the first couple rounds include audience votes. So it really, it helps if you get a lot of friends to come out. And so like, most of the shows are sold out because everyone on that round of the contest brought 25 people so that they could get votes. And it's a very smart money-making scam on the part of a comedy club, because the winner gets $1,000. It's like, they've made so much more money than that by that point. But the last round, so they had been doing it, I think 3 years before I won already, and I did the year previous to winning. But I was the first girl to win it. Maybe I was the fourth winner. I can't remember what year it started. Anyway, it's like a 2-month thing, and the scene in Portland gets like very tense and very dramatic about all this shit. And it's so silly because outside of there, it like literally means nothing. It doesn't even guarantee you work at that club, which is funny. I mean, I was already working the club, but not every winner has like gotten a ton of work there. So it's very fun, and it was fun to win. The last round is like combination of audience response and a panel of judges that are like mostly local media people or other more senior comics from the area. Like radio DJs and fucking a guy from the news. It's like a lot of the time people that don't even really know anything about comedy are judging you, which is kind of like a similar vibe to the Seattle competition and the San Francisco competition, where it's like who are these judges? Like they don't know what's funny.
Just determining people's fate too.
Yeah.
So crazy.
And I hate contests. I think I've only done that one. I've never done SF or Seattle. I've done that one and Big Sky, which is also a festival. So it's like professionally there are benefits to doing Big Sky, even if you don't place at all. But in Big Sky, there's always an audience vote, and the audience is in fucking Montana, in like a bar. So it's like, I don't know, these cowboys don't like me. Like, I don't feel bad about my set, but I know that they're not going to vote me in the top, Mm-hmm. So it always skews like a certain kind of winner in some ways. But yeah,
you gotta work on your fucking cowboy shit. I
know. Or one guy, this dude Graham, who's really funny, like he just like did crowd work for like his whole 7 minutes or whatever about Montana, and like they loved it. I was like, oh, I'm trying to do my 5 minutes for the Tonight Show booker that's here, not the Cowboys of Montana. So it's this weird vibe where you're like, okay, do I want to win this contest or do I want to like get meetings, because Comedy Central would always come to Big Sky and all the late night bookers, and a lot of people got like opportunities that way, including me. So contests are generally not my favorite thing, but the Helium one was fun. And then one of the local papers started to do like a best comedians in Portland kind of thing, and I won the first one, and that was That was a huge scandal, very controversial in the
I've
scene.
heard Portland is really like middle school, like high school drama-esque, like
Well,
just a lot of
Seattle's so much even worse. Like it's like a competition at this point.
yeah, you're right. I mean, it's crazy. It just the amount of time that people spend fighting over shit.
Well, so much of it is Facebook based. And the problem is in the Seattle group and the Portland group, similar issue where you can be a person who just is like a hanger on, like you never perform. Maybe you did some open mics 6 years ago, but you were never funny, but you're still in this group weighing in on comedy shit all the time. Like, why? You're not even doing the job. And so there's maybe like, 20 people in both towns that are very to pretty good at stand up and work a lot, and then 400 just randoms who
I'm
like
so glad you're saying this right now.
chime in the fucking group, and it's just like, who the fuck are you? Like, you don't even do this job. You shouldn't get to weigh in, but it's such a big job for those moderators. Like, God bless, the angels of both scenes that decide they want to control the comics Facebook group. It's a thankless and horrible job, but they don't just go through and decide to delete people from the group because they haven't been, doing shows or whatever. Like, they just let everyone stay. And then there's even people in other towns. It's like friends in Chicago would be like, what's going on in Portland? I'm like, you're in the Facebook group? Like, why? You just want, because people want to see the drama.
It's insane. It's crazy. But
I was very hated by many people in Portland when I got there. And then for sure when I won both of those truly meaningless titles.
So ridiculous. So then did you go to New York from there? Or
I did. Yeah. I went to New York for a little while. I have some friends who I won't name that are comedians that are basically squatting, but in like a very expensive, nice building in Brooklyn. It's kind of a long story. It involves basically a mafia of Hasidic Jewish building owners in New York who don't follow all the building codes, and like they just stopped paying rent. So there's this really nice apartment where many comics have stayed there, and they were like, yeah, if you want to just basically live for free, for a chunk of time. I did that before I came to LA, and I just wanted to just like stay there long enough to get passed at a couple of clubs that I really wanted to work. And also just like make people think I lived in New York, which was pretty effective. I still sometimes have people messaging me and being like, hey, can you do my show on Tuesday in Brooklyn? And I just say like, I can't make it. I don't say like, I don't live there. Cause I am there a lot historically pre-pandemic. So that was my goal. It's like, I've always wanted to live in New York, but my family's in California. I like having space and a yard, like I love LA, but I was like, well, if I'm not going to live in New York, I just have to commit to going out there as frequently as I can afford it. And so I just did that for years and years until I like stayed in that apartment for a while before I that illegal squatter's apartment before I went to, it's crazy. It's a crazy story too, because one of the guys, like the property owners tried to retaliate many times because two different units in the building had figured out this scam. Like they could just stop paying rent and there was nothing they could do because they were violating all these building codes. And so one of the ways they tried to retaliate was by just shutting off the water, which was like the only thing they could really control because they couldn't shut off the power to just one apartment. And so they like straight up sawed into their ceiling and rerouted, the comedians rerouted all the pipes so that they would have water, full water access in both apartments. It's insane. And they're still there. Like they haven't paid rent for probably 7 or 8 years at this point in Greenpoint. Like it's hilarious. But anyway, that's
it is such a I don't think most like normal people understand like the lengths some people will go to do comedy full time. Like
Yeah.
just like squatting at a place like that. It's crazy to me. I mean, there are people I know living in vans driving around the country. And I mean, I love the stories. They're great. I mean, it's
Well, and
fucking
that's
hilarious.
they made a pledge very early on, like, if we're gonna rip off these shady dudes, which they are shady, it goes beyond property shadiness. Like, there's, a lot of bodies turning up in dumpsters and shit like that. Like, these dudes are gnarly. But they have so many like warehousey kind of buildings that they converted, didn't do everything legally. And so for the most part, they just pay the fines. Like, every once in a while, the city will catch them on something and they'll be like, okay, we'll pay 100 grand because we're in violation of this thing. Like, there were no like fire escapes in this building. Like, we for sure would have died. Well, one of the comics tied a rope so that if there was a fire, we could just, I guess, scale down the side of the building. Like, I'm fucking Spider-Man. Like, I don't think I would have made it, but so they just pay the fines, and because they don't want to get fully shut down, and they're just like, and then they move along. So like, technically nobody in these buildings is required to pay rent. But so one of the things they said early on was like, since we're ripping these guys off, and we rerouted all the water pipes, we will always be a place where comics can stay for free if they want to do shows in New York, stay for a few months. Like, they're just so generous with it. So they like totally paid it forward to, like, a ton of comics have lived in this same apartment.
That's rad.
But yeah, it's so true. And it was a game changer, because even to be in New York for a few months and be able to do shows without paying rent is like, it makes all the difference. Because otherwise, yeah, you're just burning an insane amount of money to make, maybe 25, $50 a night if things are going well. That's like if you're working clubs and whatever.
It's crazy. And to get like an apartment too, you have to have this like crazy proof of income. And I was just talking to Matt McClowry about this. He was on last episode, and it was just bananas to like get a 1-bedroom with 3 other dudes in New York. It was just crazy.
I know. And then, yeah, especially if you're picking up and moving there to do comedy, you can't prove your income. That's one of the reasons I moved kind of when I did to LA, or the way that I did, as I was like, okay, I'll go to New York first, but I'm going to start apartment hunting in LA while I still have pay stub from my Portland job. So they let me like overlap, and I worked remotely for a little while. I mean, they didn't want me to leave either, so they were like happy to have me keep doing the work. But I did that strategically so that any landlord I went to, I could say like, oh, I have a remote job. Like, they just let me lie. My boss was like, yeah, I'll cover for you. Like, I don't care. So I had an income I could prove. Yeah, without that, you can't get a fucking apartment. Like, even if you have a huge savings, landlords are just like, no, like, you have to show me that you have a job. Like,
it's crazy.
And it's already scary enough in LA, but in New York, it's insane. Yeah, the hoops that you have to jump through. Even to live with friends, even to like move into a room where, 2 other people already live there, they're on the lease. Like, everybody has to be on the lease. Like, it's just a cutthroat housing situation that I never really wanted to get involved with.
Yeah, it makes sense. So overall though, are you happy in LA?
Yeah, I love it here. I mean, I'm like obsessed with California in a really embarrassing way. Even though when you're from the Bay Area, there's always this weird like fake rivalry that people are like, LA sucks. And I'm like, I don't know. I never really bought into that. It's a rivalry that LA doesn't care about. Like, it's all in the minds of people in San Francisco. But yeah, I love it here. I mean, I am fortunate enough, yeah, to like work pretty frequently when I'm here. I think it's more convenient for like industry stuff for sure. And it's not like, LA feels like vacation a lot of the time, and that can hurt you for a couple years when you move here. Like, I always tell people, like, if you do the thing that a lot of us do, including myself, where you're like, okay, I'm going to move to LA with like a really, a lot of savings so that I'm not like drowning financially. You also can just like spend 2 solid years relaxing in a way that you wouldn't in New York, because you would just be fucking grinding and drowning, and like, it's just so much crazier and busier there. Yeah, I did just like lay in a pool for a solid 6 months when I got here, and it was great, but it's not, the feeling of LA is not always good for your work ethic, I guess I would say, because it is like it's an easy place to live. I'm saying that, and I know like if I said that to someone like my mom, she would be like, you're fucking insane. Like, you live in like the jungle. Like, it's so scary. Like, people have guns and you're going to get robbed. Yeah, it's still a city, but it's just like, I don't know. It's really fun and chill.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take your whole entire soul away like New York. Having said that, I still want to spend some more time living there, but it's yeah, I love it here. I truly do. The clubs are really fun, and there's just so many cool indie shows. And like, I don't know, it's Los Angeles. It's really cheesy and cliche, but like, I live in a fucking movie. It's like the nights that I'm like, Saturday night when I had 2 shows on opposite sides of town, and I'm just like driving from one to the other with my windows down and like listening to music and like driving down Sunset. I'm like, this is the fucking best. Like, everything you see is from a movie. Like, it's just an insane way to live. And it's so fun. But that's also at this level, right? Because I can like valet at like the first show that's I'm getting paid for and is a cool show, and then go to the Improv and like it's not, if you're at an open micer level, it's definitely a lot tougher.
Sure.
So I'm very grateful now.
Yeah, just the coffee shop comedy and fucking all that bullshit. Well, I know you wanted to shoot for around an hour, and we're getting
I
close.
got a little more time. I'm not in a huge rush.
Okay, because I wanted you to, the theme of the podcast is like storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I probably should have told you the theme before we started, or early in this episode, but like I asked you like either share some good like bad comedy club experiences, whether with like I mean, you've told me a couple of them. I think like something involving a birthday cake on stage.
Oh, yes.
Or like any of your teacher stories. So can I play I'll cue you in with the Storytime music, okay?
Okay.
It's story time. It's story time with Adam. Yeah, it's story time. It's story time with Adam and friends.
That was me singing. Oh, go ahead.
Beautiful. I love that you call this Fathom and Friends and you're just by yourself. This like no one. I was expecting like a whole crew or.
Well, I like to think
friends.
that guests are my friends, but
oh, interesting. Yeah, no, that's not what's going on. Well, it's funny you bring up the birthday cake thing. That was in Portland, but that club, Harvey's, which is now under new ownership, and I think is open again. I'm not exactly sure. Downtown Portland right now is
with the name of the club too. Like,
oh yeah, oh, I will always name Harvey's Comedy Club in Portland, owned by Barry.
Heard horrible things about this place.
It was really fun, and it was the polar opposite of doing Helium at that time, but it was like what I liked about it was less it was a good workout because it was fewer like major comedy nerds, which like Helium would bring a lot of those out, which of course we love them. We love anybody who goes to like a show once a week at the club because they just want to see everyone. Like, yeah, so grateful for you guys. But Harvey's was just regular people, and it was people from the outskirts too. So Portland's a very white town. We all know that. The shows were pretty diverse because, you know, people would drive 30, 45 minutes to go to Harvey's because the tickets were free usually. But the cake story is only one of so many. But that was probably one of my first times working there. And I had heard a lot about Barry, and then he was like pretty sexist. And, you know, it's at some point it's just like, well, he fucking owns the club. Like, you know, you're not even surprised anymore. You just have to kind of be on guard and try to be funny. And then if it's shitty, you know, just be like, well, I guess I'm never working there again. But it's so common. It's like laughable. So I kind of had been warned. I have a rapport with this guy for whatever reason. I don't know. To put it in his own words, he was like, you know, you're one of the only women that like gives me this much shit. And I'm like, I have to stand up for myself. But there was a birthday party and the girl was turning 21. And so they brought like probably 20 people for free because Harvey's had a phone bank. I think they still do. They literally worked from just a list of phone numbers and a bunch of people in an office that would call you and be like, hey, do you want to bring 20 friends for free to Harvey's on Saturday? You know, or if you have a special event, a birthday, whatever, like we got you. It was just like an entirely papered room, basically, even though sometimes they had really good headliners that fully deserved to have people buy tickets. Barry never believed that though. Like he didn't believe any comedian was good. And he would always be like, I don't want any ego in my club. That was like his big thing. Like, I don't want to headline anyone who thinks that
I've
they
heard about
like
this guy before that like he was like, my promotion is so good. It doesn't matter who I get in there. I can book out the room.
Yeah. Cause he doesn't care about the quality of the show or the experience. He just wanted to fill seats and make money on food and beverage. So whatever. A lot of club owners are like that. But this 21st birthday party is there. It's a huge group. And I am featuring, I'm pretty sure it was like maybe one of my first times featuring. And then I get off stage and Barry's like, I'm going to need you to take the cake out to the birthday table. And I was like, oh, like as a fun, like, isn't this cool that one of the comedians brought out the cake? And he was like, no, I'm just kind of short on servers at the moment. And I need you to actually like cut and serve it. And I was like, Barry, I don't work here. And he's like, I just really need you to help me out with this. And I said to him, to his face, you would never ask one of the dudes to do this. And he was like, yeah, they wouldn't do it right. Like, I know that you'll know how to cut and serve a cake. Like, what's the problem? You're being like really difficult. And I said no. And I was like, Barry, if this is the thing that makes you decide you're not going to work me anymore, that's fine. Because this is fucking ridiculous. I'm not serving the cake. So I said no. And then later that same night, in the middle of the headliner set, that fucking girl got carried out on a stretcher because they overserved her by a lot on her 21st birthday. Because Harvey's never cut anybody off. Like, this is actually a real crime in Oregon, so I probably shouldn't be calling them out this way, but under new ownership. And she probably also ate an edible that was a little bit too strong for her birthday. And she lost her mind. She got very sick, passed out, and they did not stop the show. Barry would never stop a show for anything. So the stretcher came in, loaded her up, loaded her back out. The headliner never acknowledged it because it was Harvey's. And this shit happened so many times. Most headliners that have worked Harvey's a lot will tell you that they've seen a stretcher take someone out multiple times in their career. And the show just fucking went on. And half her birthday party stayed and enjoyed the rest of the show and kept drinking. I've seen several table fires at Harvey's. Some intentional, some not, but they have real candles. So they overserve people, don't police the room, and then they have fire on every table. So one of the fires was I was on stage, I was hosting, and this very sweet lady in the front just had like a leather purse with like some fringe on it or something, and she put it on the table, and so it caught fire from the candle. And she was very embarrassed and her friends helped her put it out or whatever. That was accidental. But the second fire I saw was very much intentional, because this huge table that was super drunk, they'd been rowdy the entire show. No one ever quieted them. Like, they never stopped talking. They thought it would be fun to get a round of fireball shots and then dip napkins in the fireball and then put them on the candles in the middle of the show. So Dwight Slade is on stage and he sees just several small fires at this rowdy table. And Dwight is a very regimented comedian. He does not do crowd work, really. He does not stray from his act. He crushes. He's a pro. But he's never like breaking character, really. And then he even was like, does anyone work here? Is anyone? Oh, and then they were using like beer or other alcohol of some kind to try to put out the fires. Just insane. And Dwight's like screaming from the stage, like, Barry, get your fucking shit together. This table's on fire. No one cares. And he was so like distraught. Like, I don't know. The end of that weekend, Dwight was like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore, man. Like, it doesn't make me happy. No one respects me. Like, he was so depressed. I'm like, I think you just need to not work at Harvey's anymore, Dwight. Like, that would probably be step number one. Because he's proven this over and over that he just does not care at all. And if you try to talk to Barry about this shit and be like, hey, his staff didn't like him either, because he was shitty to them and he had super high turnover. So it's like, none of his staff was going to be like, I already have to deal with these shitty customers, my terrible boss. I'm not going to put out literal fires. Like, this is not in my job description. And he wouldn't even, Barry, he wouldn't even comp you like a water bottle. Like, he was so cheap. We had to pay for all our drinks, food, until, at some point, like, the bartender, who was really sweet, would be like, just come to me. Like, I got you, Yeah, that place is nutty. Very, very crazy.
God damn. That was awesome, though. For like inside comedy shit, I love hearing that stuff. Like, it's good they're under new ownership.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if the new owners really knew what they were getting themselves into, but yeah, it's still kicking. I think the upside for new comics to like experiences like that is just when you get into a really good club or a good show where you feel respected, taken care of, the crowds are quiet and nice, and the staff is awesome. Like, you just appreciate it so much more when you see the alternative. And that's why I've dated several comedy club managers in my life. There's something about that job, if you do it really well, where you're like, including my boyfriend, who, we were together for 7 years, but like, that's how we fell in love, because it's this like, it's a very giving kind of position. You're just like, I'm here to make sure that everything works, and I'm just a vessel for like making sure we have a good comedy show. And if you do that really well, it's like a very specific personality type that apparently I'm very attracted to. Because it's someone who's like, I'm not about being in the spotlight for myself. I really just, it's like a facilitator, it's almost like a teacher or coach. It's like, how can I help you succeed? Like, that's a very kind of attractive quality when it's done well. But so many club managers don't do it well. And there's so many places I show up, all over the country, where I walk in and I'm like, is anyone here? I don't know where the green room is. Some guy's checking my ID and I'm like, oh, that's my face on the poster. I'm working here this weekend. And like, no one greets you. No one picked you up. It's just like, so when you get that, like, it's like a hospitality job, basically, and when you ever meet when you're traveling, like a great hotel manager who's got like business cards and shit. And he's like, come by, I'll comp you a glass of wine. And it's like it's such a specific job and personality type. But I love that, probably because it's also somewhere within me. Like, I love to host a party and take care of people and whatever. So
Yeah, my
it's,
mom's that way too, where they're just certain people that they love to do that. Like I mean, and it's a fucking job. Like I think a big part of it is being able to like put your ego aside and be like, this isn't about me in this moment. Like this is about making sure everything else gets taken care of. But like, I don't think a lot of those people get the recognition they deserve in that
Totally.
moment. But like, you remember it in those situations where it's really bad, and you know,
yeah,
they matter. They do.
and for new comics, I always say, like, be nice to the club staff, man. Yeah, appreciate them, tip people well, because a lot of these folks want to continue working in comedy, and like Adam has, and he's now working for, like, I mean, he has a fancy Hollywood job in comedy, and he's like, I mean, he remembers 8 years ago when some headliner treated him like shit, and maybe that guy's name comes across the desk for like a major role in something, and that just, I don't know, maybe the email goes away somehow because he's like, this guy's a prick. Like, and there were so many times at Helium in Portland too, where comics wouldn't get on the mic over and over after signing up every week, and they weren't sure why. And then it would come out that, like, well, because every time you get a drink at the bar, you tip nothing. And like, we all talk, like the staff is here to help you succeed, but they're also working. And like, I have such close friends that work at the Punchline in San Francisco. Like, people truly feel like my family. Like, yeah, those jobs suck, and they're dealing with so much ego that it just always shocks me that any headliner, any comedian would come to a place on the road, especially when you're like, if you've been out for a bunch of dates and you're like, oh, just like, I miss home, it would be nice to just like walk into a place and feel like welcomed. Like, how many headliners like take that for granted or treat their staff like shit? Like, it's so nuts to me. I don't understand it. I never will.
But
a lot
there
of
are
those
some
people still
that
get
do
ahead,
it really well though too. Like on the other side of that, there are people that come in and they got no ego, and they are happy to be there, and they're the best to the staff. Like,
totally.
and the whole weekend goes so much better usually. I mean, if the staff's on your side, like if there's a problem, it gets resolved faster. I mean, they want to help you if you're being cool with them. Like, it's a team effort, like you said. And
totally tip the staff, tip your openers. Like, I've learned so much working with Nicole Byer. She's just like insanely generous, and I am not at a level now where like as a headliner I'm making a ton of money, but even a small tip to my openers over like what the club paid is like, I mean, it means so much to people, and it used to mean so much to me when people, even if a headliner just slipped me like a 50 or something, like, or Venmoed me $100, I'm like, God, this is the best person I've ever met. Like the bar is so low, because the reality is that a lot of these headliners at clubs can make, 15, 25 grand in a weekend, at a theater, 100 grand. And so the fact that people still will pay their opener $100 is fucking sick. So, and it all gets out there, you know what I mean? Like, we know who is touring, who's super cheap, and who is really generous, and like, it's only going to help you get ahead being a fucking good person. I mean, that's not why you should do it. You should just, I remember
it makes such a big difference, and it's such a small thing in comparison, when they're making exponentially more. And some people do it like religiously, and it's not even a thought that they're going to do that. And then there are other people, they don't. I mean, I've worked with people that do it both ways, but there are also ways to be like helpful and cool without doing it financially too. So I think it's just how you go about yourself. Because
totally, I like taking openers out to breakfast and shit or whatever. If I was
where was my French toast?
I probably slept in that day.
Yeah, probably.
But you're right. It does make the whole weekend so much more fun. It makes everyone funnier if, like, the headliner especially is chill and like is on board with it being a team effort for that week. And it's like, yeah, it is tiring. It's a lot of energy if you're in a different place every weekend to like, show everyone that you're working with and everyone at the club like a lot of love every place you go, but it's so worth it and it makes the shows better. And it's just like a vibe. I mean, I've opened for people that were assholes that I really felt like it translated to my energy on stage. Like almost the crowd could feel like I didn't want to fucking be there because, this guy's being a piece of shit in the green room. And then I have to come out and like do a good job and be funny, but also introduce him like we're fucking friends, even though I hate him. Like it's just yeah, I just never understand why people are dicks, but I assure you it will always come back to you too. That's the other, not ever. I mean, at some point there's a level of fame where people can just be assholes and no one gives a shit. But in that like middle ground where you're like, oh, I'm a club headliner, I'm a pretty well-known comedian, but I'm trying to, like get a sitcom or get roles in movies, like it's gonna get back to people that you were a dick. Like, I mean, which it should.
At the end of the day, too, like, what are you even doing this for? If it's just like, I mean, I've always thought of comedy as being like, it's an individual pursuit, but like a lot of the best parts are with the people that you're doing it with. So I don't want to be remembered as the guy that was an asshole, like, regardless of how funny I was on or off stage, like, I don't know. And there's a lot of conflict in the area, more conflict than any other thing that I've ever seen in life. Like,
right.
The amount of drama, like so many comics should pursue drama because they are so fucking good at it.
I know.
But yeah, that's not how I want to go down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and not just the people that you're working with on stage, but I truly think the crowds, like it's a very different thing. If I'm like doing the Cellar in Vegas, like there might be, and I think there were, maybe like 6 people over the course of the week that actually came up to me to say, we came here to see you, or they sent me a DM or whatever. But for the most part, it's people that just wandered into a comedy club, right? And I still like honor them and I am grateful for them. But in a situation like when we were just in Seattle and it's like, 2 sold out shows of people who want to see me or Johnny or both of us specifically, like that is so special to me. That as exhausting as touring is, it's still like I have to show up for these people because they showed up for me. And that's like huge. Like I always think it's crazy when I still sometimes don't even register when I have a fan. Like I'll be like, oh, Adam, it was the weirdest thing. There's like this lady that like shows up like every time I'm in Seattle. And he's like, do you mean a fan? And I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, I guess so. Like, that's so nice of her. And he's like, that's not how it works. She's not doing you a favor. Like you're performing. But I do think it's so nice. And I try to keep that perspective because just to show up to your shows with a shitty attitude when people like fucking got a babysitter and like paid all this money to see you specifically, like you're just a piece of shit. Like just enjoy it. We literally are like here to bring people joy and make people laugh. It's a super cool job. Even when it pays shitty, it's hilarious how much it pays. You know what I mean? It's like, even if you do a week at a club that pays $1,000, which is bad, like that's bad money, right? Like at a certain level, you should not work clubs that pay you $1,000 for 6 shows. It's criminal. I know what they're making. Okay. They're making a lot. But even then, the poor, like working class part of me is like, but I did just tell jokes for like 1 hour a night. I didn't do any manual labor. And I made, 10 times what I would have made like waitressing for a weekend or whatever. So I don't know. I think maybe being that poor part of me keeps me grateful too, that I'm like, I'm broke. I don't make a lot of money doing stand-up, but it's really funny for what I'm actually doing, which is telling jokes. Like it's crazy that people pay you for this.
Sure.
And it's so fun. Like, I just don't understand why anyone keeps doing it when they hate it, because it's already so hard. So if you hate it and you have a terrible attitude, like just
fucking
get out.
Yeah. It's stupid. Like it's such a fun job. And like, if you're not having fun with it, don't make it hard for everybody else. Like, we don't want to hear your complaints. Get out.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's like, yeah, it's really hard a lot of the time. And a lot of people will show up and make it shitty and heckle you or, harass you after the show. Like, the number of times I've been grabbed or had people say fucked up shit to me or like follow me to my car. Like those things are all awful, but all in all, it's like that shit also happened when I worked in tech and when I worked in the music business. So at least now I have that 30 minutes to an hour that I'm on stage that I am fully in charge for the most part, I mean, not at Harvey's, but in most other places. Like I have that
firefighter.
Yeah, I have that agency and that power that sort of, it balances out all the shitty parts. Like I totally understand why people get like bitter and worn down, but I just think that comes through so much in your act that if you get to that point, you need to just quit unless you can turn it around and fix it. Like it's just over.
Well, before we go, where can people find your stuff? Anything you want to plug, your podcast, website one more time so they can be fans of your show and fans of you and come check you out?
Yeah, my podcast is Who's Your God? And we talk to comedians about religion and spirituality. My website's Amy Miller Comedy. I have some dates up there. If you have Epics, which only my mom does. No, I think it's free on Roku. Otherwise, it's $5. I have a special up there under the Unprotected Sets series. You can also do the free trial, watch some of those specials because they were all really funny. It's a great group of people, and then just cancel it when the week is up. That's fine with me. And what else? Yeah, come see me on the road, I guess, if you want to. No pressure.
What's your IG also?
Oh, it's just Amy Miller Comedy, and then my Twitter is Amy Miller.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share this podcast with a friend and rate and subscribe to us. Also, please don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FNF Pod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. Welcome to my wave pool, my wave pool. 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 Welcome to my wave pool.